So now let's take a look at the cross-elasticity of demand. What are those determinants that will impact the relationship now between two products? So remember that we really need to be talking about two things now when we talk about the cross-elasticity of demand. So we really need to model two different markets here. So what if we thought about, say, something like our candy bar example? We have demand for the candy bar, and then over here, maybe this is a piece of fruit. That we still have this relationship in each market between price and quantity. That the candy bar has its demand, the fruit has its demand, but now there's this relationship between these two markets, right? They're substitutes to one another. And as the price over here of a candy bar rises, some people would want a piece of fruit. And as the piece of fruit gets more expensive, some people would want a candy bar. Now, we've looked at that, and if you remember what we call that, that's really thinking about the substitution effect, right? That the price change over here causes some people to either substitute in or substitute away. And so what can we do between these two products to make them either good substitutes or not so good substitutes, right? Because the big impact here is the idea of substitutability. Right? So this substitutability between the two products, right, that's really saying how good are they? Well, what happens if now all of a sudden people are more health conscious and they really consider fruit and candy bars not very good substitutes? That what would we expect to change over here and what would we expect to change over here? Well, now a price change in fruit, right? So if, say, fruit gets more expensive for some reason, that now no longer will represent a move over to the candy bar market, right? So the quantity that changes as a result of this, that quantity change, is going to be smaller. So demand would be more inelastic as a result of that. This gives us then some insight into how we could approach the cross-elasticity between these two products. Right? If we can think about, how substitutable are these sort of products, one for the other, what can we do to impact that? We could also look at this not from the substitution effect, but from, say, the complement side, where we now look at how compatible are the different products. Right? And we may want to think about that with, say, something instead of talking about candy bars and fruit, but maybe we have, say, one type of computer system and another. Right? Can you share data from one computer to another? So if you thought about, say, using a Mac or a PC, can you share files from one person to another? And as that process becomes easier to share between them, right, what that means is those products become a little bit more compatible. But now, what if we talk about products that are actually complements to one another, right? So the ability of one product to make the other product even more useful. Right? So we could look at, say, using software. So look at a PC and then look at Microsoft Word. As Microsoft Word gets more useful, right, what does that do to demand for the PC? We still have that relationship between two markets. Right? We have a demand curve, and in those two markets, what we can see is if we look at, say, Word up here and then PC down here, right, as sort of it improves up here, that's going to have an impact down here. So that cross-elasticity of demand in these complements will actually improve the relationship between them. And we saw that with the cross-elasticity of demand. Now, the last thing I'd like to talk about is what we call switching costs. And so switching costs really ask us to think about kind of this idea of a substitute, but now not from how good are the products, but how easy is it to change. Well, in this example, between candy bar and fruit, Well, it's really easy. You just go down to the store, and instead of buying a piece of fruit, you buy a piece of candy bar. There's really no switching cost here between these two products. You just buy one product over the other. But what if instead we think about something like accounting software for your business? Well, now there's some very significant costs associated with switching from one product to another. How do you get your data from one software package to another software package? What do you have to do to train your employees on, say, one product and another product? That becomes a very different process. And if we take a look at it on our, say, a demand curve, instead of for candy bars, maybe this is now for accounting software, that price change that we consider here, as that gets larger, then what happens to the costs that it takes to switch? Right? Remember, that's really an opportunity cost for the business. I can go get a lower priced product, but in exchange for that, I now have to change my data and I have to retrain my employees. Maybe I have to change how I do business. Maybe instead of being able to, say, cash out my credit cards every hour, maybe I can only do it once a day. And that then would impact that decision of whether to switch products or not. Now, as those switching costs get lower, what happens? Well, now a price change over here means that I can switch, but it doesn't really cost me very much. And so demand then will be what? Demand will be more elastic as a result of that, right? It's going to be easier to go from one product to another.